Tonight's story isn't just breaking news. It's the moment the war took a turn no one predicted. A moment Washington had prayed would never arrive, Moscow had hoped would go unnoticed, and Kyiv was determined not to face unprepared. What Russia did in a span of hours sent shockwaves through satellites, radar stations, intelligence rooms, and war rooms across the world. And Ukraine's answer? Fast. Calculated, devastatingly precise. This is the moment everything changed. For months, U.S. officials whispered about a possibility they didn't want to say aloud. Not confirmed intelligence, not field reports, just a quiet suspicion. Russia was preparing something different. Not bigger, but riskier. Not louder, but far more dangerous. A move that didn't match their previous patterns, their deployments, or the rhythm analysts had gotten used to. Russia, though unpredictable, had always been consistent in its unpredictability. Their decisions followed a sort of grim logic, a pulse. But this week, that pulse went silent. To seasoned analysts, silence is never a nothing. It is the calm before someone breaks the rules. At 3:12 a.m., U.S. Space Command spotted a clustered movement near one of Russia's long-range missile regiments. Not routine drills, not a reshuffle. These were missile launchers that hadn't budged in over a year, now moving in formation. Mobile units capable of carrying systems Washington watches more closely than almost any other hardware on Earth. When a nuclear-capable state changes posture, even by inches, Washington takes notice. When it does it without explanation, Washington reacts. Within hours, the White House issued an urgent, rare warning, the kind reserved for only the most serious shifts in global security. Officials used words they almost never use publicly. Escalatory, a destabilizing, intimidation. This was not symbolism. This was capability plus intent plus timing. And the moment that warning hit Kyiv, Ukraine acted. No hesitation, no confusion, no committee meetings. Minutes, literally minutes, after the repositioning was confirmed, Ukrainian long-range reconnaissance drones took off from multiple locations. Not the small battlefield drones, not quadcopters. These were the drones Ukraine only uses when striking high-value, deeply protected Russian targets. This was a preemptive counter-escalation. According to Ukrainian officials, within the same hour, they launched coordinated strikes on Russian command centers near the front line, including one that had recently been reactivated and was believed to be part of Russia's next phase offensive planning. Ukraine didn't strike randomly. They targeted the systems that made Russia's new move operational. Radar arrays, air defense nodes, transport vehicles preparing to support launch operations. In other words, they attacked the skeleton of Russia's escalation. Analysts now say Washington's warning gave Ukraine a tiny window, a very narrow advantage, and Ukraine used that window with surgical precision. Had Kyiv waited even hours, Russia might have brought its new posture online. Instead, Russia's preparations were interrupted mid-motion. U.S. intelligence sources speaking anonymously described the Russian maneuver as a probing action intended to measure the West's resolve after months of political gridlock in Washington and growing fatigue across Europe. Moscow wanted to see if anyone would flinch, but no one flinched today. Washington didn't blink. Kyiv didn't stall. NATO didn't wobble. Instead, the U.S. sent a message so blunt that even the Kremlin, usually unfazed by diplomatic language, reacted internally. What happened next reveals how closely Ukraine monitors Russian behavior. The timing of their strikes was so exact that Russian units were literally in transit, caught between positions when the first explosions hit. That level of timing requires real-time intelligence, coordination, and confidence. Ukraine proved it wasn't waiting for the West to save them. They are tracking Russia as intensely as the U.S. is, maybe more. Throughout the day, updates flowed in. Ukrainian jets executed low-altitude runs across contested zones, forcing Russian formations to scatter. Artillery units hit ammunition depots Russia had quietly resupplied 48 hours earlier. Special forces deep behind enemy lines disrupted communication towers critical for Russia's new deployments. This wasn't retaliation. This wasn't chaos. This was strategy. Russia's one consistent challenge since the start of this war has been maintaining control. Control of territory, control of logistics, control of narrative. Every time Moscow tries to regain momentum, Ukraine disrupts the structure behind the move. Russia once believed Ukraine would collapse in days, NATO would fracture, US support would fade. Tonight, all three assumptions are proven wrong. Again, Putin now faces pressure from every direction. Hardliners demand escalation. Moderates demand negotiation. Soldiers demand relief. Families demand answers about a war that was supposed to end 2 years ago. When a leader under pressure makes sudden military moves, it is rarely from strength. It is from vulnerability. That vulnerability is what Washington's warning targeted. That vulnerability is what Ukraine's strikes exposed. President Zelensky's urgent speech tonight made the message clear. Ukraine will not allow Russia to dictate the tempo of this war, not through intimidation, not through posturing, and certainly not through surprise maneuvers. But the most concerning detail is this. Russia's movement today wasn't isolated. Naval units shifted formation in the Black Sea, aircraft altered flight patterns. Cyber teams activated unusual levels of activity. Multiple domains moved in the same 24-hour window. When Russia moves land, sea, air, and cyber simultaneously, it means something bigger is beginning. And for the first time in months, the world saw Russia attempt to rewrite the rules of escalation. Ukraine's answer, not today, not on our watch, and not without consequences. What comes next may shape the next phase of the war, or prevent it from spiraling into something far worse. Because tonight, Russia isn't speaking. And when Russia goes silent, history has taught us one thing. They're not backing down. They're recalculating. Pentagon officials speaking late into the night confirmed that Russian units near the northeastern front are relocating at a pace they haven't seen in months. Supply convoys are moving faster. Fuel trucks are repositioning. And the missile posture shift, the one that triggered Washington's urgent warning, appears to be part of a much larger multi-step realignment. The question now isn't whether Russia moved, it's why. U.S. analysts are considering three major possibilities. 1. Russia is preparing a new large-scale offensive, not immediately, but setting the infrastructure that would make it possible. 2. Russia is forcing Ukraine to slow down existing counteroffensive operations by creating the illusion of a new threat. 3. Russia is trying to push the West toward negotiations through fear. This is the scenario worrying officials the most. But regardless of Moscow's intentions, Ukraine removed one of those cards from Putin's hand today. They struck early. They struck accurately. And they struck the exact nodes Russia needed for whatever they were planning. This is why the timing mattered. If Ukraine had waited even half a day, Russia's infrastructure would have been fully operational. The launchers would have been supported by radar systems, air defense coverage, and secure command centers. Instead, Ukraine disrupted them in motion. That disruption forces Russia to recalculate, and recalculation takes time. Time Ukraine just bought. Reports tonight show that Russian units are regrouping slower than expected. The Kremlin hasn't issued its usual fiery statements. No televised threats, no dramatic claims. Instead, silence. Inside intelligence circles, silence is louder than threats. It means Moscow is reassessing. It means today did not go the way they expected. And it means Ukraine's preemptive strikes may have achieved more than anyone realized. Meanwhile, Washington's line remains clear and unusually firm. Senior officials stated that Russia's moves were inconsistent with stabilizing behavior, diplomatic language for, "We see you, we understand you, we won't let you get away with this." Ukraine's military, energized by today's successful operation, confirmed additional strikes on Russian ammunition hubs, mobile radar units, and communication lines throughout the evening. Each hit eroded Russia's ability to execute whatever it had been preparing. One Pentagon analyst described today's Ukrainian response as a masterclass in rapid operational decision-making. Ukraine's ability to detect a threat, process intelligence, launch coordinated strikes, and disrupt Russia's escalation all within hours proves one thing. This is no longer the Ukraine of February 2022. This is a war-seasoned nation with sharpened instincts and unmatched battlefield agility. But the danger isn't over. Multiple NATO countries are now on heightened monitoring. Surveillance aircraft are flying extended patrols. Cyber defense units are on standby. European governments are coordinating responses in case Russia attempts a multi-domain escalation. Because while Ukraine dealt a strategic blow today, no one knows how Moscow will react. Russian hardliners have already begun pressuring Putin publicly, calling for retaliation. But retaliation brings risks. Risks Russia may not be ready to face. Putin is fighting not just a war, but a narrative. Losing momentum matters. Losing the appearance of strength matters. And today, Ukraine forced him into a position where reacting too aggressively could fracture the fragile balance he's trying to maintain at home. This is why analysts are watching the next 48 hours closely. If Russia pulls back, today will go down as a failed attempt at pressure. If Russia escalates, the U.S. and Ukraine have already shown they are willing and prepared to meet that escalation head-on. One thing is certain, tonight's actions changed calculations in every capital involved. Kyiv proved it will not be intimidated. Washington proved it will not hesitate to call out dangerous moves. NATO proved it is alert and unified. And Moscow, despite its silence, proved something too. They were watching the West as closely as the West was watching them. But tonight, the advantage swung toward Ukraine. This war is far from over. The stakes are rising, the strategies are shifting, and the next move belongs to Russia, a Russia now forced to rethink everything it planned. We will continue watching this story unfold because tonight's events may hold the clues to the next chapter of this conflict.